Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday again, May 13th, 2024. Time to move on to another week. Seems like the weekend really flew by. So hopefully you are out there having a great Mother's Day if you were celebrating Mother's Day, or if you were lucky enough to see any of this supposed Aurora Borealis, which is obviously a huge hoax because we were socked in by clouds all weekend and have no way of independently verifying that all of you weren't just making it up. But maybe you got a treat out of it. I did see an interesting observation over the weekend via social media. Somebody pointing out, this is interesting. Like in one weekend, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions perhaps of Americans, and I guess people all across the northern hemisphere, but not all that far north, got a chance to, I guess, tick the northern lights off of their bucket lists, and that this could actually impact tourism to Scandinavia for decades. That's actually, it's on everybody's list, I think, just to see it. And the fact that people could walk out of their front doors and actually see it without making the trip to the traditional spots for this, well, maybe. That's interesting. I didn't get to see it, so my trip is still on, except I don't actually have one planned. But it's sort of one of those things in the back of the mind. One of these days I'll get there, somewhere, wherever that is, to see the northern lights. But lots of lucky people. As far south, I think, as like Texas, we're seeing this. By the way, lots of residual effects from it, including a story I put away that ordinarily would never make our radar. But now, of course, even if you got radar, the radar wouldn't be working because of the solar interference. But this story I'll just sort of mention in brief without diving all the way into it. But the solar storm knocked out, as it turns out, farmers' tractor GPS systems during peak planting system. Apparently, for all of you farm-to-table enthusiasts, I guess RoboCop or the Terminator is planting your crops that you're enjoying in farm-to-table restaurants. These are automated, they're out there in the world, are automated tractors driven by GPS systems that I guess we're supposed to get stuff in the ground for you to enjoy at your local restaurants, or also possibly the cows that you will enjoy in local restaurants will get their soybeans planted for them by robots. But not this weekend. And I don't know how long it's going to take to repair these things. But anyway, it appears that they've set themselves back quite a bit. We could dive into the details of it and find out whether it means anything for you locally, or whether it's just a big setback, or whether they can just kick the side of the machine and get it to work again, or get cyber trucks to do the planting or something like that. But aside from the big show in the sky, it has effects, I guess, to be blasted by all sorts of incredible plasma and radiation from the sun. Whoops. All right. Well, there are some residual and knock-on effects, as our British fans would have to say. And then, of course, also part of the weekend display, Donald Trump was not in court for his trial over the weekend because they take a break. So he jumped over to New Jersey and put on a rally in Wildwood, New Jersey, and then immediately began wildly exaggerating the attendance at the place. Justice notes that I think the venue was said to hold 20,000 people. So, of course, they were immediately claiming 80,000, 100,000, a million, whatever it would be. Even Roger Stone jumping into it. I don't know. Apparently tweeting last night. Didn't verify whether it was real or not, because who cares. But tweeting around a photo, I guess, of an aerial photo of what he was claiming, whether he was kidding or not, I have no idea, was the Wildwood rally. And basically, all you people who doubted us, here's photographic proof of how many people were here. I'd love to see any of the rest of you, or your stupid Sleepy Joe kind of candidate, draw this sort of crowd. And as it turns out, of course, it was an aerial photograph of well, not a Donald Trump rally, a Rod Stewart concert from 1994 in Rio de Janeiro. By the way, everybody's sort of pointing out, like, yeah, sure, the famous mountains of the Jersey Shore visible in the background there. I don't know. Don't know why they're doing it. I think somebody actually managed an aerial photo of the thing having taken off from an airport nearby and snapped a picture of the, 3/4 full venue. And he draws a crowd. There's no doubt about that. Lots of people love to go and be bored and then stream for the exits when he starts babbling. This one was exceptionally babbly, I guess. Lots of clips circulating over the weekend of him going on at great length about, let's see, hot dogs and Frank Sinatra, and what a great friend Frank Sinatra was. And apparently he really harbored a deep hatred for Donald Trump, as it turns out, because they crossed paths in their casino era, I guess. And at any rate, there's that, and he also claimed to be friends with Luciano Pavarotti, which is a state disputes at some point, and tells him he can't play his music at his rallies, but all sorts of things like that. Plus, of course, the do not congratulate message got crossed up once again as he congratulated this. He says, the late great Hannibal Lecter, who was, of course, a fictional character and a bad guy, and not really sure why he introduced Hannibal Lecter into the dialogue there, but then he went on to say, well, you remember, he was a bad guy, he was a cannibal, and he ate people, and another thing, immigration. So that was the scenario there. I don't really know why, but what can you do? His kids need to keep him out on the road in order to keep the income streaming in, and his organization, I would ordinarily say, also need to keep him out on the road to keep the income streaming in, but the income doesn't stream to them, they never get paid, and then they leave in frustration. But whatever. The show goes on, I guess, and then back to trial. There's somebody who can tell him to shut up for a week, and he has to keep his mouth closed, or else it's going to cost him money and get him in trouble. So I like the structure of the weeks for that reason, and the weekends less so. But it would be fine to return to the weekend later if he's, in jail. That would be great. Okay. Well, Greg Dworkin has collected some stories of what happened over the weekend. Many of them, I'm sure, obliterated by solar radiation. But whatever has survived, he's ready to share with us. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. If you scroll down, I sent you a lovely picture from Portland, Oregon.
All right.
Of what the solar flare looked like. The Northern Lights. It was really lovely.
It looks great.
My son happened to be visiting somebody, so he was fairly north, and the skies happened to be clear, and it was nothing short of spectacular.
I should like to have seen that, but I have a picture of what it looks like here, and if you've, I don't know if any of you have ever seen clouds, but that's what we had, and they're fantastic natural phenomena in their own right.
Yeah, people in Philadelphia were complaining because they didn't see the solar eclipse or this thing. Oh. Because clouds both times, and so God doesn't like Philadelphia. What can I tell you?
He's trying to make a claim through sports.
But it was overcast the first night, but enough so that you could see a pinkish glow in the sky.
Cool. I was wondering whether I would be able to distinguish that from the pinkish glow of Reston, Virginia, over the hill. But
that's sort of yellowish mostly.
Yeah.
But instead of the yellowish of Danbury, we saw pink, which was interesting. And, of course, the pictures I've seen are basically pink and green.
Yeah. And there were some nice scientific explainers over the weekend, too, about why the different colors and how far it penetrates into the atmosphere has something to do with it. And, of course, whatever paint might be on sale at Home Depot probably has something to do with it as well.
Exactly. So, of course, the big news today, is not the New York Times Siena poll. They have another one. Not great for Biden. But interestingly, in their poll, I think that the one thing to take away from the poll is the continuing dynamic, not just them, but everybody else. If you look at registered voters, Biden does poorly. If you look at likely voters, Biden does much, much better. Much better. Mm-hmm. And so the idea here is that people paying attention
make yourself comfortable.
Biden does okay. Low propensity voters, which are also low information voters, tend to remember Trump fondly because they're just sort of mad at how things are right now. And what's interesting about that is that means that on the one hand, they're persuadable, and on the other hand, they really don't know a whole lot about what's going on. So that's why the Trump trial is so interesting. Not the trial itself, which they won't be following, but the verdict when that comes. So that's the thing that we're keeping an eye on. The other thing that poll watchers have noticed, as a general rule, is that Trump's numbers don't change all that much. Biden's go up and down depending upon who's pissed at what for why. And that doesn't necessarily correlate with how you vote in November. So all of that, that's why I'm not spending too much time on the Santa poll. Very good pollster, but, models are models, and you don't really know. So the trial, I titled the Pundit Roundup today, Michael Monday, because that's what it is.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And Michael Cohen is just a fascinating figure.
Yes.
Who is flawed.
All right.
Like Sammy the Bull Gravano was flawed. And by the way, Sammy the Bull was one of the people that was invoked by Trump. You noticed when you were talking about that Wildwood rally, which was totally incoherent and rambling and crazy.
Yeah.
He talked a lot about food.
Well, he does like
He talked about eating hot dogs and Frank Sinatra's advice not to eat before a performance.
Yes.
To which Trump answered, well, I'm a politician, not a performer. Of course, he said this to Sinatra before Sinatra died, which I think was like 1998. And at that time, Trump wasn't a politician. So obviously the whole thing's made up. Yes. And that wouldn't stand up in court.
Tears in his eyes, Right.
And then he talked about Pavarotti, but only in terms of eating.
Well,
Pavarotti ate before his performances, and he was a good friend of mine. Yes, he is, but food.
Yeah.
The only reason you mention Pavarotti is as a human being, Pavarotti ate.
Yes.
Just like
so
me,
he
therefore
imagined.
we're both the same.
I guess so. There's a lot in common.
Yeah.
That is odd. Yeah, Marcy had an interesting observation on it too. Also, I guess invocation of a couple of other characters who killed people after dinner. And she thought that was made a psychological link to the testimony of Stormy Daniels, whom he had invited allegedly for dinner to his room, but then famously had provided no food.
Well, the other side of the coin, of course, is why invoke Hannibal Lecter? Well, obviously food.
Yes, right.
It all ties together.
Yeah, I mean it's
just
it's
Hannibal
a theme
Lecter
for
ate
him.
different things.
Yeah, him. People birders.
I'm surprised he didn't say Jeffrey Dahmer endorses me.
There's no way to find out it's not
because
true.
It would have been in the chain. I mean, it would have been the whole chain of thinking. The whole,
right.
These rallies these days are all stream of consciousness, but he doesn't know that much. So, they tend to be boring and repetitive for that reason. So anyway, Michael Cohen comes to the stand today having set up everything for him by clearly laying out that a crime was committed. And the question is going to be who's responsible for the crime, right? This is, Very often Colonel Mustard with the poker in the library with the lead pipe, because Cohen has to, as was said by Anna Bauer this morning on Twitter, prosecutors need to show that Trump caused or directed the entry of false business records. We know they were false.
Okay.
We know Stormy Daniels was paid. We know Michael Cohen paid her. We know that Trump reimbursed him. And we know that the checks were signed by Trump. And we know that the entries, the bookkeeping part, they were entered as legal fees, which they were not. Okay. So we know that there were false business records. I think that's been proven.
All right.
We'll see what the jury
says. We got him on a misdemeanor.
I think the prosecutors did a pretty good job of proving it. What they have to do
is
show that Trump caused or directed the entry of false business records as part of the scheme to reimburse Cohen for the Daniels payment, says Anna Bauer. We've yet to hear direct evidence of Trump's involvement, but Cohen can speak to that. He can also testify to another key element that the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Trump caused a falsification of business records with the intent to defraud and violate some other law. And the other law, of course, is the election law that says you're not supposed to take steps to misrepresent yourself to the voters. And I think David Pecker established that. So really, the key is that, and Michael Cohen said, and everybody else said that Why did you do this? We did this for the campaign. And yes, he had a character witness, Westerhut, who was his administrative assistant, but was fired from the White House, a young lady who had a few drinks with reporters and said, he really hates his kids, and she felt bad about it. She got fired. But she still is loyal because he gave her big chance and said that, he really cared about the kids of Melania, which is, of course, a lie. But, we'll see what they do with that.
Gave her a big chance to be a witness in a criminal trial.
I don't think they brought up the fact that she was fired under those circumstances, which means they can't use it in the closing argument. As I understand, you can't introduce new evidence in the closing argument.
That's true.
So we'll see where they go with that. But the Michael Cohen stuff is going to be sensational today and then fireworks tomorrow. Woo. As a very aggressive cross-examination takes place, trying to tear him apart to see if he can keep his cool. So how aggressive they are depends upon how good or how bad today's testimony was. But he has already testified in a previous case, for the record.
Not including his own.
Not including his own. And I think Lisa Rubin covered that this morning.
All right.
And it was rather interesting. In August 2018, and I will send that to you. I didn't include that in the list.
Oh.
Because I didn't have it in front of me. I was too busy trying to find
now it's there.
Pictures from Portland, Oregon about what the...
I'd rather have those pictures.
What the solar flare look like, what the northern lights look like. But this is Lisa Rubin. In August 2018, Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to causing American media, that's AMI, that's David Pecker's National Enquirer,
right,
unlawful campaign contribution to Trump. Unlawful campaign contribution. That's the crime. Like I said, Pecker and others testified to the fact that it was unlawful. And to making an unlawful contribution of his own through the Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels payments, respectively. And again, the legal eagles are arguing about whether the McDougal one was really illegal or not, but the Stormy Daniels one clearly was covered up because they have Trump's checks paid to Michael Cohen from his personal account, and Trump labeled them as legal expenses. That's why the Stormy Daniels is key, and that's why her testifying about why he would do that is so key. It may sound salacious, but it clearly, went right to motive.
All right.
And
mens rea. Went right to his motive.
What was that men's upset about? Because that woman's was telling the world about the sort of story she would have told had she been able to. Anyway, here's the actual transcript from that 2018 trial. The court. All right, you may proceed. The defendant, that would be Michael Cohen.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so he's behaving himself on the stand so far. As to count number 7, on or about the summer of 2016, in coordination with and at the direction of a candidate for federal office. It's always so weird when you do these in trials because, I wonder who that is.
Right.
I and the CEO of a media company, at the request of the candidate, worked together to... Now, this is on the record, under oath.
Okay.
Of a media company, at the request of the candidate, worked together to keep an individual with information that would be harmful to the candidate to the campaign from publicly disclosing this information. After a number of discussions, we eventually accomplished the goal by the media company entering into a contract with the individual under which she received compensation of $150,000. Sidebar, that's what they say in legal terms, that would be Karen McDougal. I participated, Michael Cohen, not Michael Cohen the writer, but Michael Cohen the fixer. I participated in this conduct, which on my part took place in Manhattan for the principal purpose of influencing the election. Your Honor, as to count number 8, because that was count number 7, on or about October of 2016, in coordination with and at the direction of the same candidate, I wonder who that is, I arranged to make a payment to a second individual with information that would be harmful to the candidate and to the campaign.
Yes.
To keep the individual from disclosing information. He didn't say harmful to the candidate and his wife. He said candidate and to the campaign.
Right.
Those are the words. To accomplish this, I used a company that was under my control to make a payment in the sum of $130,000. And, of course, that would be Stormy Daniels. The monies I advanced through my company were later repaid to me by the candidate. I participated in this conduct, which on my part took place in Manhattan for the principal purpose of influencing the election, says his words.
Okay.
Mr. Cohen, says the court, when you took all these acts that you've described, did you know that what you were doing was wrong and illegal? Yes, Your Honor. All right, you may be seated for the moment. Thank you, sir. So that was Michael Cohen testifying.
Okay.
In August of 2018. And during the plea allocution, as Lisa Rubin helpfully explains, the process by which a pleading defendant takes responsibility for his crimes, Cohen said he acted not only in coordination with, but at the direction of one Donald Trump. And that's the crux of what the prosecution needs to become.
Okay. So maybe that was his trial, actually.
As they wrap up their case this week, how, when, and why Trump expressly directed Cohen to ensure McDougal and Stormy's story stay buried. Beyond that is something they need more. Testimony showing Trump knowingly and intentionally caused Cohen and Trump Organization staff to falsely document the repayment to Cohen. So we've seen loads of evidence that the business records were false. Senior Trump execs, including the ever-loyal, hands-in-everything Alan Weisselberg, engineered the repayment scheme. Missing direct evidence beyond the checks that Trump himself disguised or caused others to disguise the distributions. That's Cohen's sole purpose and function, and starting today, we'll see whether nearly 6 years after he first pleaded guilty, Cohen can deliver on that promise. So that's what the prosecution's going to try to get out of Michael Cohen today. Interestingly, there was a discussion, I don't have references for this, I just saw it and heard it, and I think Randall Eliason, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the lawyers. Lawyers like to argue about things. I don't know if you've noticed that.
How do you know I haven't noticed that?
But one of the things they like to argue about is, I'm not telling you this directly, but if I were the lawyer on this case, this is how I would do it. And therefore, if they're not doing it, they must be doing it wrong. So a lot of it, is that.
Yeah.
But some of the lawyers are trying to make the case that it was a mistake on the prosecution's part to not interview and subpoena Alan Weisselberg from Rikers in front of the grand jury.
Yeah.
And find out what he had to say and then decide whether or not they were going to use him as a witness. They decided not to use Karen McDougal, but they knew what she had to say, and they decided they didn't need it. The judge was sort of interested in what Weisselberg has to say. The problem is Weisselberg's already told everybody that, firstly, I'm going to lie, and secondly, I'm not going to tell you the truth about anything, and that's why I'm in Rikers now. And that's what the prosecution was trying to tell the judge, and the judge was saying, well, it would have been interesting to see him here. And I don't know what that means. The judge is in charge of the case, and I don't know what it means that it would be interesting, and I don't know what it means for the jury. I don't know if the jury needs to hear it. There were three people in the room when Cohen and Weisselberg and Trump came up with this scheme. Trump's not going to testify. Apparently, Weisselberg's not going to testify unless there's a surprise. Okay. And so Michael Cohen is testifying, and that's why that's why this is Michael Monday.
Okay, I'm ready for it. What time do they start?
9:30.
9:30 is the usual. What time is Cohen there at 9:30, or does he get to come in the afternoon?
I don't know. I think he goes first. I don't know if they have anybody else because they ended early on Friday.
Is that right?
Because they didn't really have anything else to go over.
Yeah.
So
he's pretty guilty. So should we knock off?
Is Cohen the last witness, or is there another one after that? And if there is, who is it? There's people who you could have.
I don't know. Melania.
Well, no, Keith Schiller. If that's his real name, I can't remember his name. The bodyguard that was outside the room when Stormy was there in the hotel with Trump.
Yeah.
He could testify that. I saw her there. She was there.
I kept her there.
Or he could take the fifth. So I don't know if they'll have him. Weisselberg as a surprise so that he could plead the fifth. I don't know. Or somebody else for reasons that are unclear at this time. But it's only Monday, so we have a day, maybe two, of testimony from Cohen, and then a day or maybe two of cross, and then a day or maybe two of redirect, and then recross, and then I don't know if you get redirect or recross. I don't know how that works.
The defense will then have their opportunity I guess, put on their case in chief and bring their witnesses, and they'll be
however
direct
many
and
they
cross
have.
of them. And yeah, right. Or they should. I'm sure they'll say everybody who was at the Wildwood rally.
Of the jury,
one at a time.
Trump is going to win the election. I rest my case.
Yeah, right. Hot dogs, Pavarotti, something.
I call to the stand Frank Sinatra and Luciano Pavarotti.
Why not? It's entirely possible.
And since they can't come, Sammy the Bull Gravano.
Right. And who knows whether he can make it there or not. Well, is he still alive? I don't know. I guess so.
Sammy the Bull?
Yeah, I don't know. He wasn't that old, but
he's been on social media. But see, part of the thing about Sammy the Bull is that he was the rat that ratted on John Gotti, but he's not a good person.
No.
But that worked in the trial, so some people are using him as an example.
Oh, I see.
However,
sometimes.
Sammy the Bull, at some point on social media, not in court under oath, said, I tried to corrupt Trump. I couldn't. That means he's incorruptible.
Oh, I see.
I'm a character witness.
I guess so. Also, I murdered everybody.
That's for sure. That doesn't make you a character witness. And not in court, on social media. So that's why his name was name dropped.
Okay.
At some point by Trump.
This rings a bell.
Again, I don't know what Sammy the Bull was eating.
I don't know, but I hope that's not Sammy right now at the door.
Yeah.
Because, I'm not
Hannibal.
answering it. Forget it.
If it's Hannibal Lecter, it's even worse. It's even more scary.
I guess so.
Firstly, he doesn't exist. Secondly, he's a big
mackerel. What's going on around here? Yeah. So, okay. Well, crazy. All right. We'll wait for Michael Monday to begin. I guess it begins during this break. They're waiting for us to play the music, but there's...
So today, Trump brings Eric Trump, Alina Habba, Tommy Tuberville.
Really?
J.D. Vance.
Huh.
Mark Maliotakis.
They come to
Is that Mark?
trial?
I don't know which Maliotakis. One of the congressmen.
Yeah.
Boris Epstein and more.
Weird entourage. I mean, Eric is the only one of the kids who's showed up so far, but that's...
Right.
Whatever.
So this is going to be the most crowded court it's going to be so far.
Yeah, Tommy Tuberville. Look out for a January 6th style jailbreak, everybody. Be careful. And whatever. And something... It's a touchdown of justice. I'm Tommy Tuberville for... All right. Well, anyway, we'll be right back, and so will they. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's all go out for hot dogs. It's about time.
Yeah.
9:30. All right, so things getting underway there.
Well, the important thing is, who Joey Chestnut's going to endorse. But Andrew Weissman had another really interesting observation today. Do you know? Well, you know, because we talked about it during the break. But you know?
Yes, then okay.
This whole show is rigged. Do you know who the luckiest man in the world?
Oh, I didn't know that was going to be the framing, but I do now.
Yes, it's Senator Bob Menendez. Why?
Ta-da.
Because his criminal trial kicks off today just down the street.
Really? Who even knew?
Nobody's paying attention.
Yeah. Is it a Manhattan court for some reason?
District, New York, Judge Stein.
That's interesting. Okay. Well,
it's a federal trial. What, are you going to make a federal case at? Well, yeah, actually.
Yeah, well, sure.
Whereas
but
this
why
is
not
not
in
a
New
federal
Jersey?
case.
I'm
This
not
is a
sure.
state case.
Okay.
Trump.
But the gold bars came from New York, I guess.
So they're different courthouses.
All right. Yeah.
So you got to walk from one to the other.
Yeah, they like to put
Not
them
far.
all in one
Just down the
area.
street.
But, okay. All right, so in the federal courtroom down the street from the state courtroom where Trump is on trial and bringing an entourage with him to watch him flounder.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Interesting.
So Weissman also wrote
Yes.
a really nice article in the New York Times guest essay, What I Am Listening For in Michael Cohen's Testimony.
Okay. What?
So Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan District Attorney, has amassed evidence that appears to independently both prove the crime and corroborate Cohen's account.
Yes.
To call Mr. Cohen as a witness carries with it not only the reward of adding further critical evidence, but also the risk of undermining the case with issues related to Cohen's personal baggage. He is, like Ms. Daniels, a colorful character, catnip to the press, and his broken bond with his former boss is inherently dramatic. I mean, this is Greek tragedy here.
Yeah.
He joins a line of
music.
famous underlings who turn state's evidence against their boss. That's where Sammy the Bull comes in. I've personally observed this in organized crime cases. Salvatore Gravano,
That's
known as Sammy the Bull, the former underboss of the Gambino crime family, testifying against former Gambino boss John Gotti, the original Dapper Don, Teflon Don.
Yes, right. He was
Economic crime prosecutions like the former Enron chief financial officer Andrew Fastow, testifying against the former chief executives Ken Lay and Jeff Skilling, remember those names?
Yes.
And political corruption matters like Mr. Trump's former deputy campaign manager Rick Gates testifying against Paul Manafort.
Yeah.
Cohen can provide a detailed insider account because the trial's already established there's simply no alternative narrative that's consistent with all the trial proof. Cohen is far less important to the outcome than initially thought. That's because David Pecker, Jeff McConney, the accountant, a subordinate of
Weisselberg?
Weisselberg.
Okay. All right.
Alan Weisselberg.
Right.
Andrew
Jail guy.
Allen.
Guy in
Alan
jail.
Weisselberg.
Alan, prisoner.
McConney and Hope Hicks have laid out a clear narrative of a scheme to kill derogatory stories about candidate Trump.
All right.
Now,
I'm into it.
That's
Yes.
important.
What?
It's not
Where?
family man Trump, candidate Trump. And disseminate
Yes.
damaging accounts about his political adversaries, including direct conversations with Trump and smoking gun handwritten notes of Trump Organization financial personnel provide evidence for the alleged cover-up through documentation that disguises the reimbursement of the hush money as legal fees. It's a sign of the unusual political dimension of this trial that Daniels, and not the far more legally damaging witnesses Pecker and Hicks, was subject to the far more intense cross-examination. Which is true. They didn't really go after Pecker and Hicks. That's presumably because Pecker and Hicks know even more, and he didn't want to piss them off. A key remaining issue, and one that Cohen can address, is whether Trump, remember this is the New York Times, everybody gets a Mr. in front of it because that's their
Mr. Jailbird.
conceit. Mr. Cohen, Mr. Trump, is whether Trump was aware of the alleged cover-up scheme involving reimbursement checks that Cohen disguised as legal payments. Cohen laid out the hush money payments, a fact that was well established by direct and circumstantial evidence. Take the handwritten notes from Alan Weisselberg. They reveal he must have been aware of the hush money scheme and its alleged cover-up. His notes and the notes of the former Trump controller, who prosecutors say helped carry out the scheme, detail how to reimburse Cohen. The idea that Weisselberg, a Trump Organization veteran who's apparently been willing to serve time in jail rather than turn against Trump and remain on the Trump payroll even after his guilty plea, would have approved these payments on his own is far-fetched. And that's what the case is what's the difference between far-fetched and beyond reasonable doubt? I mean, that's really the continuum that the jury has to wrestle with. Witness after witness attest to as being both a micromanager and a penny pincher. Against all this evidence, we now are expected to hear from Cohen. Successful prosecutions can often not be made without such witnesses, and that's particularly true when the boss consciously doesn't leave a paper trail.
Sometimes he eats it.
Well, Mr. Trump famously groused about his White House counsel. Is you taking notes on a criminal conspiracy? Observing that one of his favorite lawyers, Roy Cohen, never did.
Right.
So the prosecution feels like they need to call Trump. But even accepting Mr. Cohen's story, it means he lied to a federal judge after taking an oath to tell the truth. Same oath he'll take at the criminal trial of Mr. Trump, and the story would support an anticipated defense claim that the federal prosecutors were so intent on making a case against Mr. Trump, they're willing to trample on Cohen's rights.
Oh.
The other option is that Cohen is lying about not being guilty, which may be a very distinct possibility given the proof against him. If that's the case, it would mean he lied in the recent state court fraud case. As a federal judge in New York recently concluded in denying Mr. Cohen's motion for early termination of his criminal sentence, he lied in one forum or the other. But that doesn't mean Cohen shouldn't be called. Jurors want to hear someone recount what they already know, and we'll soon learn whether that'll happen again in the People v. Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Which is
Go People.
Yeah. So the people call. Right, the state doesn't call. Bragg doesn't call. The people call.
Yes.
It's the People v. Trump.
the Donald. Yeah.
So since we're doing lawyer stuff, I thought I'd throw in this piece, which is sort of interesting. It engendered a lot of discussion for various and sundry reasons. Betsy Woodruff Swan, who's a good reporter, and Kyle Cheney, also a good reporter, for Politico, have a piece called Felons or Dupes? Treatment of Trump's fake electors has varied wildly by state.
Well, they acted wildly different by state.
Basically, Ken Chesebro was indicted in Georgia, but nowhere else. Everywhere else, he's giving state evidence.
Right.
84 Republicans in 7 states falsely claimed to be Donald Trump's presidential electors in December 2020. 3.5 years later, dozens of them, but not 84 of them, are facing criminal charges that can land them in prison. Dozens haven't been charged. And even though the fake electors all participated in the same scheme, some have been charged as dangerous criminals, others have been treated as mere dupes. The disparities depend almost entirely on where they live. And what they don't say in the article, which they should have said, is there's a couple of different reasons for that. One is that different states have different laws.
Well, yes,
but more importantly,
that's true.
In some states, they signed the I'm the elector and I am casting my vote for Trump, and they put it on paper and they signed it.
Yes.
And in a few other cases, I can't remember which state exactly, maybe Pennsylvania, they said, or maybe New Mexico, they had a codicil added that said this is void if, and it only counts if the courts agree that there's a case to pursue.
Right.
Otherwise, the statement's null and void, some lawyerly thing like that.
Yeah.
The point being that the ones who signed and didn't have that in Arizona, Michigan, and Nevada are the ones who are under indictment. And the ones either who didn't sign or who had that codicil in Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin aren't facing charges.
Mm-hmm. Did they do it in Wisconsin? Maybe, yeah. Pennsylvania, I know. And New Mexico, yes. I think they did it in New Mexico,
Wisconsin,
too.
Maybe they didn't sign. But there's some reason Wisconsin didn't do that. And in Georgia, 3 fake electors have been charged alongside Trump while others struck immunity deals. Meanwhile, an architect of the scheme, Wisconsin lawyer Ken Chesebro, the cheese, has only received what some experts call a slap on the wrist after he reached a plea deal in Georgia, and he hasn't been charged in any other state. The attorneys general in Georgia and Arizona, that's a salute here, the attorneys general are the only state prosecutors to charge any of the alleged organizers of the scheme. At the federal level, special counsel Jack Smith cited Trump's involvement in the fake electors and the wildly varying legal consequences, especially since it appears many of the people Chesebro supervised may face much stiffer consequences than he will.
Yes.
So Derek Muller, a professor at the University of Notre Dame's Law School, says it's a direct result of America's unusual election system. Basically, state laws are different.
Yeah. We can't have this patchwork, says the Supreme Court.
Now, this is where it gets really weird. Okay. A lawyer for Chesebro, meanwhile, said some of the fake electors went further than he wanted them to. Enthusiastically claiming to be the real electors when, in fact, they weren't.
Oh, really?
Enthusiasms. So, that's the important part. It's like, it wasn't my fault.
No.
I just drove him to the bank. I didn't tell him to go in and actually take the money.
Yeah, I don't think that's actually correct. But okay, I don't know that anybody.
I don't think it either. And some of the lawyers reading that said, "Oh, Chesebro's lawyer's in trouble now."
I guess so. I can't think of any place that I know of where they went. There's how much further can you go than saying you're the elector when you're not?
They signed the paper.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's how you say you're an elector. I don't think there's anything beyond. Everybody's got to sign something. But in some states, they signed some extra stuff that said, I'm only the elector if the court says I'm an elector, which, whatever. We'll buy you some protection on your intent, but everybody else signed something. That was awfully dumb of them, and I don't know what else they could do to go further. But, maybe there's something I don't know about it. But, yeah, meanwhile, Chesebro should be, the mastermind conspiracy guy getting tried somewhere. And I guess it's entirely possible.
Hopefully it's because he's actually spilling the beans. So Lester Pines, a Wisconsin attorney who's worked for a host of liberal clients, said nobody in Madison's close-knit legal community expects Call, a Democrat, to charge the fake electors with crimes. Why that is, none of us know. He doesn't seem to be in the least bit motivated to do so, to the great disappointment of people who vote to elect attorneys general to enforce the law and to our Democrats.
Yeah.
So that's weird.
I don't remember.
And it's especially notable because the fake elector plot was hatched in Wisconsin.
By Wisconsinites.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, we'll see.
So
maybe it has something to do with who's going to testify.
Article that I thought was worth highlighting.
Yeah.
But
I'll have to read that up.
Chesebro says a lot of behavior after December 14th, after they signed the ballots.
Yeah.
Where they're like, we're the real electors. Those Democrats are all fake. The election was stolen. I didn't tell them to do that. I just set it up so that they could have an alternative scheme, he's basically saying. So he's going with, this was an alternative elector, not a fake elector. Remember, I told people to say that. I told them not to say fake.
Yeah.
He did.
Yes.
And they said fake.
Yeah.
That's probably what he means when he said they went too far.
Maybe. I don't really know if he has a good claim at not knowing very well. I mean, what if you're signing the papers, that doesn't do you any good unless you also, mail them to Congress and say, and at a minimum, in the absence of any court decision to the contrary, we've signed these things and you decide whether we're the real electors or not. But then I guess some other people, including people like Ginny Thomas, urged them to say, well, I don't know whether they're fake or not, but I want you to say that they're real. How about that?
Right. So breaking news, according to Katie Fang, who's in the courtroom.
All right.
The prosecution calls Michael Cohen.
They did.
He takes the oath.
Yeah.
He sits down. They go over his bio.
Okay. That's fun.
Interesting in the sense that they didn't go right to, let's skip the gauzy, fancy stuff to make him human for the jury. Let's just go right to, hey, are you a liar or what?
Okay. Saving everybody time.
Yeah.
Tell me about these taxi medallions.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, they're going right at it. Aren't you sort of here like straight out of, suspended prison sentence or something?
Right. Why did you want to be a lawyer, they ask. Well, I didn't want to be, but my grandmother made me. Family's all doctors and lawyers, right?
Yeah. The taxi medallions didn't pay enough,
That made the jury laugh.
Okay. Fair enough. That probably works and it's probably true. What do you mean, why did you want to be a lawyer? All right.
He can be charming.
People say that about some terrible people sometimes.
Yeah, yes. Well,
that's
part
how
of being
they do
a con artist is knowing how to schmooze.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, lots of people say that about Trump, essentially. That on a personal level, when you're palling around at Mar-a-Lago, he treats you like a friend.
Yeah,
I mean, he murders and robs all his friends, but whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's it that I have on the trial.
Okay.
What else is going on? Margaret Sullivan is still wading into the, how media covers Trump. There's still some people incredulous by the New York Times just basically refusing to acknowledge that democracy is on the ballot.
Oh, okay.
She writes a piece, Margaret Sullivan, on Substack, some unsolicited advice for Joe Kahn. I'll give you the link here at the bottom of our list. It's all, I'm working from the pundit roundup now.
Okay.
Some unsolicited advice for Joe Kahn. As November's hugely consequential election looms, I propose a mindset adjustment.
I'll take it. Sure.
No one is asking you to join the Biden campaign, stop covering the flaws and foibles of Democratic candidates up and down the ballot, or to run a bunch of puff pieces, but we're asking you to make it clear in coverage, emphasis, and framing, and in your public statements that your news organization is aware of the threats to democracy on the ballot, and that's a core part of your mission. And while you're at it, you could also stop doing everything possible to put a negative spin on Biden's legitimate accomplishments, as these two news alerts, one from the New York Times, one from the Guardian, illustrate. This is one of innumerable examples.
Okay.
Same news, two different stories.
We'll take a look.
Breaking news from the New York Times. U.S. employers add 175,000 jobs in April, a downshift in the pace of hiring. The unemployment rate ticked up to 3.9%.
Yeah.
Does that sound good or bad?
Well, makes it sound bad.
The Guardian, U.S. adds 175,000 jobs in April in the 40th straight month of gains as unemployment stays below 4%, in longest such streak since 1953.
Now, that sounds unequivocally good. Yeah.
And they make the point, look, this is the same story, different emphasis.
Yeah. Well, that's a spin game for you, but this is chronically an issue for the New York Times.
One piece you blow up, but they do this all the time. They do it constantly.
Sure.
That's why New York Times PitchBot exists.
Yeah.
Because it's basically, here's all this good news, why that's bad for Joe Biden. That's what they do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody necessarily attributed it at the time to the New York Times, but I mean, the old school version of this joke and the old school version of the New York Times PitchBot was, whatever, good news for John McCain.
Yeah.
Even when he was dead.
Right. Which came from a specific comment by a specific person on ABC this week.
Oh, yeah?
That was Mark, the guy fired who's nobody can remember his name anymore.
Oh, good.
For sexual harassment.
Oh,
Who wrote the note, the Gang of 500, that guy?
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember the whole
He's the one
episodes,
who said it.
And now I'm with you. I'm blanking about it. Okay.
Nobody should remember his name.
Good, yeah. Maybe I should. Well, yeah. Why look it up? If you want to know, Google it. But I think it's better if we all forget his name. I suppose that's right. I mean, I forget people's names all the time, so it's not like a political statement necessarily. But I'm not going to correct it. There's no good political reason to figure it out. Okay. Well, at any rate, yeah, that was one specific person. But then I don't know, sort of like the entirety of the New York Times kind of went that direction too. Okay, well, that's a
By
good
the way, today's
example.
Monday.
Yeah, right.
Well, that means tomorrow's Tuesday.
Yes.
And that means that it's probably a cross-examination, maybe in the afternoon for Michael Cohen. But the other important thing, it's a Tuesday, so there might be elections somewhere. And there are.
Are there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nebraska, West Virginia, Maryland.
Okay, they're nearby. They border me.
Nebraska and West Virginia are holding presidential primaries. We'll have to see what the Nikki Haley Trump protest vote is like in those states.
Yes.
But in Maryland, U.S. Representative David Trone.
Okay. Yes. All right.
Who's given his campaign more than $50 million.
All right.
Is running to replace retiring Democratic Senator Ben Cardin. His opponent is Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks.
Okay.
Who the politicians in the state are supporting. And Alsobrooks may beat him despite his money. Trone's turning out to be a terrible campaigner.
Oh.
He was the favorite. Both of them are favored over Larry Hogan at this point.
Well, that's good. I would rather have one of them, obviously. Trone, yeah. I mean, he's been around a bit, running for office. I think he's only been in office 1 or 2 terms. But is he the guy who, I think his $50 million came from, I think he runs maybe Total Wine and Beverage, a local, liquor store or wine shop, I guess.
A liquor store magnate.
Yeah, cool guy. It's a wine shop. Yeah. And
I don't know
very
how
nice.
He's a politician, but certainly invite him to the party and ask him to bring the wine.
Sure, absolutely. He has access to all the good stuff. And I mean, I think he's a guy who was like, I got some money. I'm interested in politics, the right kind of politics. He says the right things. He's inoffensive from that perspective. But, okay. So that comes up. That's tomorrow. We'll decide as between, or well, we'll watch our neighbors decide as between Trone and Brooks. Did you say?
Also Brooks.
Also Brooks. Oh, okay.
Not also.
Yeah, but
Brooks
she's also there.
Her name.
Her name is
also
Brooks. Also Brooks. Okay.
Angela also Brooks.
Yeah. That's all right. Cool. I didn't know what that was.
So we're rooting for Angela.
Like
we hope she wins.
All right. Yeah, Prince George's County Executive will be a very influential person in the close-in.
I want also Brooks to win.
Oh, okay. I also, I don't know. David Trump, like I said, seems like a nice guy. Maybe stay in the house and bring the wine, and that sounds like fun. And Prince George's County will be the close-in suburbs around D.C., and usually a very heavy and actively voting black population there. So that's sort of like the power center of the black Democratic elite of the state, if you will. And when I say elite, I mean, people who actually do the work and go out and organize the place. They win. That's what makes them elite.
Right. And here's I'll finish today's segment with two interesting pieces, what I thought interesting.
Okay.
And, part of the reason of framing it that way, of course, is, as you know, I'm a moderate directly in the political center because everybody is either to the left or to the right of me, and so that's my perspective. And I'm telling you about stuff I think was interesting because if I didn't think it was interesting, I didn't tell you.
Right, and we wouldn't have time anyway. There's so many interesting things.
So Brookings has a piece. North Carolina's emergence as a swing state could help Biden win in November. And they're just looking at demographics and other, data points here. Drawn to high-growth industries and areas, new North Carolinians have come from heavily Democratic states, unlike Florida, where everybody from Ohio moves to the villages.
Yeah.
The percentage of North Carolinians with at least a bachelor's degree is growing. North Carolina Democratic Party Chair Anderson Clayton hopes to tap into college campuses across the state to encourage young people to register to vote and recruit them, and he's working on that.
Okay.
So that's all good. And Politico has a different piece than the one I talked about. Abortion ballot measures try to keep Dems at arm's length. Activists fear Democrats' efforts to ride the coattails of abortion ballot measures put their passage at risk. It's an interesting dynamic here. They want Republicans to sign on to the ballot measure. That's what's happened in other places.
Okay.
And it's particularly concerning in key presidential and Senate battlegrounds like Arizona, Montana, and Nevada, where the ballot measures, and that's true in Florida too, where they need 60%. That's not true everywhere else. But ballot measure campaigns to codify abortion rights need more than just Democratic voters to succeed. We haven't won or beat back a single one of these ballot measures without significant independent and Republican support, said Minnie Timaraju, President and CEO of Reproductive Freedoms for All. We spent a lot of last year talking to candidates directly saying, don't put things on the ballot just to enhance voter turnout for Democrats. That's not how this works.
No, okay.
But
well, I have a clip
November is an election where like everybody shows up to vote for Democrats or Republicans. That is how it works. So, it's an interesting dance you have there. We want everybody to vote for our measure, so we want to make this about women, not Democratic women.
I can see what they mean.
But Democratic women in particular need to show up and vote for this. And while you're there, so if you're the Democratic person running, you have to say, you have to show up to support this.
Yes.
But you can't make it a Democratic initiative. You have to, I'm the Democrat. I'm partisan. This nonpartisan thing is something I as a partisan support. And so, you have to be a little careful about doing that.
I see. I bet they would let you say Republicans put it on the ballot, but
Republicans want this to fail. You can say that.
Yeah. Okay. How about that? Right. And I mean, there's a certain line that can be walked, and most people are walking it and say, well, we're going to do everything we can. This is on the ballot because it's about your freedom, and lots of people love freedom. Even from the other party. However, it will be destroyed all over again if you also.
I just want you to know I support it and my opponent doesn't.
Yeah, and put them in the legislature.
This is not a
and
Democratic
won't do
initiative,
any good.
but I happen to support it, and my opponent doesn't.
Okay.
I'm not telling you which party my opponent is. You figure it out.
Wink. Right. Okay. Well, that will work. And interesting bit about North Carolina. North Carolina kind of getting Virginia'd here, just sort of people moving
it's gonna take
in.
A little longer.
Yeah. Well, when it happened very, very dramatically in Virginia. And the people are just sort of migrating into the Carolinas as a retirement spot very frequently, or finding good jobs there after graduation and bringing their northeastern, not San Francisco, but northeastern values with them when they go. If it's the San Francisco values, that's bad, apparently. But
right. And also in the past, and this is what may be changing, North Carolina used to be something of an inelastic state. That is to say, a 3-point lead for Republicans was the 3-point lead for Republicans throughout the election. Didn't really vary. By the way, on Election Day, it was a 3-point lead for Republicans.
Okay.
And let's contrast that, for example, with Virginia, where if you ask Ed Gillespie, he'll tell you that sometimes a 3-point lead turns into a 7-point loss.
It does. Yeah. All right. Well, good. I'm glad that the same thing should develop. It's just creeping down one state at a time. Into the Carolinas, it's all right with me. And if it also solidifies a blue streak across eastern Virginia on the way, that's fine too. So, very nice. And I'm glad that's finally happening. It's been in the offing for a while, and it'll take 10 years. But, like I said, when I've told the story, moving into Loudoun County 20 plus years ago, this was a red county.
Yeah, you did us all a favor.
Yeah, so everybody followed me and joined the Democrats in that, and now Loudoun County quite blue, despite they tried to make it look like a reactionary district because they were pointing at it a lot, but the people who lived here didn't vote that way. But the rest of the state loved to point at what happened there and say, that's awful. But all right. Well, anyway, hopefully they don't have to go through the same traumas in North Carolina, but I imagine that if there's a shift in the voting, there will be people who are looking to cause trauma, the people who are losing their grip on the state. So, okay. Very good. Excellent Monday roundup, and lots more fireworks, I'm sure, to come from the courtroom, and we'll all be paying attention to that and looking for breaking news, and we'll catch up with that news with you on Wednesday. How about that? Is that it?
We'll see you then.
Okay. All right. Very good. And thanks again, Greg. And anything else pops up, or if you happen to notice something happening in the courtroom that you think would be fun and entertaining, drop it in the queue there and we'll pass it on. Same goes for the rest of you, of course, via social media or what have you. And we'll be back in a minute. See you on Wednesday. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It was a little extra musical outro on that one as we sort of fell away with just seconds to go. Now, there's no sentence we could fit in there and not get cut off, but yet there were a few seconds of music left to play. But anyway, after that exit, we can double back and take a look at some of the other things happening in the courtroom setting. There was, this was kind of an interesting thing over the weekend, leading into the weekend. Where did this even kind of come up? I'm not sure, but I have here Philip Bump's piece from the Washington Post, dated the 10th, which is Friday, right? Yeah. Of course, Trump intertwined the Trump Organization into his presidency. This was something that I guess emerged at the trial, which I don't know. Did we not think that this was going to be put on display because of the nature of the charges didn't necessitate it? But I guess the testimony from Madeleine Westerhout that Greg mentioned, which was sort of, it's funny, she's just not a name brand in Trump circles these days, and I guess it had to do with the circumstances of her exit. But while she was on the stand, She also testified, directly to things that, once again, kind of everybody knew, but when it gets laid out factually in court as sworn testimony, either puts a new light on it or just reminds everybody, like, oh yeah, right, there was other massive crime and wrongdoing that we almost forgot about, or that we all knew about, but it's just one of those things that every once in a while you get reminded of, oh gosh, right, the scope of the criminality of the Trump administration was astounding, and you tend to forget specific, or, well, not forget, but you fail to mention aloud specific episodes of criminality, just because, who can be responsible for naming all of them? I know there were so many, I'm bound to forget a few in listing them. So, she did make mention of another, aspect of Trump's chronic criminality that Bump picked up on. And the headline doesn't tell us exactly what it's about, so we'll have to dive in and read the rest of the article. Of course, Trump intertwined the Trump organization into his presidency, which was just sort of the 50,000-foot version level of the ongoing criminality. This, of course, famously promised by Trump upon winning, quote unquote, winning election and then taking office. Oh yes, but I'm going to, keep my business and the country's business separate because, well, gee whiz, thanks a lot. That's actually legally required of you. Except that, as it turns out, no, it isn't, because nobody's going to prosecute you for not doing it. And since no one's going to do that, why don't you just go a little bit further and make an entire criminal enterprise of it? Anyway, we'll read you the organized thoughts of Philip Bump and then riff on it from there, I guess. When he first announced his candidacy for the 2016 Republican presidential nomination, Donald Trump's pitch was centered on his wealth. He was so successful in business. Oh yeah. So successful that it meant he knew how to run the country. I mean, that's not his fault. He's just picking up on a theme that people had imagined for themselves for decades. What we need is a businessman in the White House, because reasons. No one knew what the reasons were, but everybody sort of thought, successful business person knows how to do things, knows how to extract money from a corporation. Yes, sometimes successfully for themselves and others and sustainably, and sometimes not. But we can't tell the difference between those things. We just look at flash and cash and hear the stories of how much money there is and decide whether or not that's a good thing. Anyway, Philip Bump says he was so successful in business that meant he knew how to run the country. He was so rich that it meant he didn't need to take donations. He was so savvy that he knew how to work the systems of which he had been a part. Well, of course, none of that turned out to be true. But eventually his candidacy flourished. People got around to asking, as his candidacy flourished, and they asked what now seems like an obvious question. Well, what happens to the company if you win? And that was an obvious question, and it was asked. So what's the problem? Well, the answer was the problem. During a debate in January of 2016, after Trump was already the frontrunner for the nomination, the subject was raised by Fox Business host Maria Bartiromo. If elected, would he put his business into a blind trust as others had before him? Precedent about presidents. If I become president, Trump insisted, I couldn't care less about my company. It's peanuts. I want to use that same up here, he pointed to his head, whatever it may be, brainworms, what have you, to make America rich again and to make America great again. Bartiromo tried to clarify. So, a blind trust. Yes? No? Trump wasn't sure about the structure, he said, because he doesn't really know what a blind trust entails, but anticipated that he would probably have my children run it with my executives, and I wouldn't ever be involved because I wouldn't care about anything but our country. Anything. Well, no. A year later, he was poised to be inaugurated as president. He held a news conference, his first in months, to present how he would be separating his business from his new position. The plan and they really should put that in quotes, the plan, handing over control of the company to his sons and to Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg, now in prison. Well, he didn't say that, Bump, but we all know that that's the case, and he knows it too, was outlined by another attorney. Remember Sherry Dillon? And when we say that the plan was outlined by Sherry Dillon, we presumably remember, even if it isn't stated here. I don't know if it is stated here, but I'll read you what Philip has to say. Outlined by Sherry Dillon, President-elect Trump wants there to be no doubt in the minds of the American public that he is completely isolating himself from his business interests, Dillon said. He instructed us to take all steps realistically possible to make it clear that he is not exploiting the office of the presidency for his personal benefit. Well, that was obviously a lie. But in addition to all that, you should probably remember, though it gets no mention here, this was the press conference. I hear you out there saying that you remember all of this. So I appreciate it. But the rest of the audience can't hear you. So I will repeat what I hear you screaming to your radio, that this was, and why are you doing that? Because I'm on the computer. And the radio hasn't done anything. Anyway, this was the press conference at which Sherry Dillon and others, they showed up, and this, I think they had like documentation. This was when, do we pronounce it Mazars? Was it Mazars? The accounting company that had the unenviable task of pretending that they were the ones taking care of the books for the Trump Organization. And they since have separated from him. They have since said that he was largely a fraud. The various trials in which he was, the civil cases in which he was found liable in New York for, cheating on the accounting and on the taxes and et cetera, et cetera. And Mazars very early on said, we're not standing by and swearing to the integrity of his financial statements. No, nothing of the kind. Never did. But this was the press conference that Sherry Dillon showed up with stacks and stacks of papers in manila folders, pointing to it and indicating, with hand gestures that, we have put together the plan. What she says here, wants there to be no doubt in the minds of the American public that he's completely isolating himself. He instructed us to take all the steps realistically possible, etc. And pointing to these papers, I was going to say to this paperwork, but it's not paperwork, but pointing to the papers and saying, he's going to have to sign all of this stuff. I don't remember who said it, whether it was Dillon or Trump himself, saying that this basically represented all the paperwork that he was going to have to sign to separate himself from the business. But then as it turned out, most, if not all, of the papers in those folders were blank. They were just props. It's going to look like this, maybe, but, the point is that there's reams and reams of paperwork that need to be handled in some way. And right here are reams and reams of paper, which look a lot like reams and reams of paperwork. We've changed the reams and reams of paper that we used as props into something that looks like paperwork by separating them into manila folders. Because otherwise it's just piles of paper, which you would then suspect we had simply unwrapped from the boxes where you, separate them into packages of 500 and then stack however many into the box. We just took out a bunch of boxes of paper and stacked them up, but that would have looked fake to you. So we went the extra mile and bought some manila folders to separate them. Surely they didn't just randomly put different amounts of paper into manila folders and stack them up so that it looked like there were many, 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 many binders full of actual, instead of being full of women, they were full of actual paperwork from a company. But they didn't even do a very good job about that. I think the people at the press conference were kind of convinced those just look like blank papers because he didn't do a particularly good job at mixing it up. Some of the folders should be thin, some of the folders should be fat, some of the folders should be binders, some of the folders should be something else. But instead you just had, uniform looking and They also didn't do a very good job of like fanning out the papers so that they weren't beautifully stacked right out of the. Anyway, you remember that, and that gave away the game. And can we see what's in the paper? No. Can we examine it? No, you can't. You'll never see these things. And it gave away the game right away on the spot. Oh, anyway, let's see. So they had this press conference, and Dylan said, oh, goodness, all of these papers means that he's clearly not going to exploit the office of the presidency for his personal benefit. As president, Trump then commented, I could run the Trump organization. Great, great company. And I could run the company. The country, Trump himself said, I could do a very good job, but I don't want to do that. So he was saying at the outset, right, everybody was like, well, clearly you're going to have to separate yourself from the company because you can't run both with an eye towards the best interests of both. It should be one or the other, and clearly it should be the country, not the company. And he's saying, actually, I could. I'm so smart, and the company is so great that I could run both because I have that kind of, thing here in the soft, the squishy, the gray pink thing in the head that I have. And I have enough energy to do both. No, yeah, but still, like legally, no one would believe that you could. No one would ever trust you to do so. But I could, but I won't. But did he? Is the real question. And Philip Bump actually does ask that. Or did he not want to do that? Well, he did want to do that, actually. On Thursday of last week, former White House aide Madeleine Westerhout was called to the stand in Trump's criminal trial in Manhattan. Westerhout was Trump's central point of interaction with the outside world during the first 2 years of his presidency, a role that, she testified, included frequent interactions with the Trump Organization because of how separate he was, right? So she was, what was the job? I don't know. But they describe it as his main point of interaction with the outside world. If you're, whatever, government stuff was handled by the various chiefs of staff, and he cycled through 4 of them, I think, maybe more. But if the business needed his input, it would go through Westerhout. And as it turns out, Westerhout said a lot of interaction. The Trump Organization constantly needed guidance from, or he was willing to provide them with guidance anyway. Westerhout would regularly ask questions of Trump Organization employees and vice versa, she said. She coordinated with Trump's Trump Organization assistant, Rona Graff, on Trump's schedule as president, calendar and personal mail. She said that at first she and Graff spoke weekly, if not daily. So that's great separation, by the way. But there were also lots of checks. Westerhout testified that the business would FedEx checks to Keith Schiller, who, as Greg pointed out, he was the body man for Trump prior to his election. He was present outside the hotel room when Stormy Daniels was inside, and et cetera, et cetera. But he converted himself into Trump converted him into a government employee, the White House employee, when Trump came over to the presidency. He brought him from the Trump Organization, and Schiller would give the checks to Westerhout to have Trump sign. So, I'm going to separate myself. I'll have my children do it. I'll have my executives do it. But every payment that the Trump Organization was making, anytime there was outgoing money, I want to do that myself, and he continued to do it from the White House. Problematic all by itself. Sometimes there were invoices attached to the checks, and this happened a couple of times a month, she estimated. So it was a constant for her. She was constantly bringing him checks and invoices down to the penny, as the way checks are written, handling all the business of the Trump Organization. One, to the benefit of himself, and two, probably, ordinarily you would say, to the detriment of the country. Though, in the case of Donald Trump, the less he was paying attention to the business of the country, probably the better. Anyway, she testifies, I think I remember maybe a couple of times, Westerhout said, him having a question about a check and then calling Alan Weisselberg or somebody else in the Trump Organization to ask for clarification. That's the level to which he was still involved in the business. Minute detail. And she knows it because she handled it for him. Trump's businesses continued to make money during his presidency. That was the whole point, of course. And therefore, so did he. He would regularly decamp from the White House to a Trump Organization property, including ones where dues-paying members had the opportunity to influence executive actions. That, too, part of the point for him. A couple of his properties alone generated millions in income from foreign interests. I mean, you may recall, though it is not stated here in this article, that he maintained an entire hotel down the street, which was essentially a laundering operation for foreign and domestic bribes that would just stick money in the coffers of the Trump Organization, note it, and let Trump himself know who had done it and in what amounts. And I don't know. We were all just supposed to stand around and do nothing, I guess, even though, I don't know. From day one, that was just an emoluments factory, and everybody knew it. And somehow the General Services Administration, I mean, he should never have been allowed to continue in ownership of the hotel. We all know that story. Armando has outlined it very clearly. The lease on the building that housed the hotel, because it was still government-owned building. It's the old post office pavilion. And this was very clearly stated in the contract that you can't lease this building for any purpose to anybody who's a government employee, because it would be a tremendous conflict of interest. Any government employee, let alone the President of the United States, anybody who's working for the government, they were that concerned about the conflict of interest. So if you were working in, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, predicting weather somewhere, can you be a part of the ownership group that leases the post office, the old post office, and turns it into a hotel? No. Can you be president of the United States, where you would in fact directly be able to influence any number of federal policies, not just those having to do with weather prediction or atmospheric conditions? Yes. Doesn't that mean that you were probably the last government employee that anyone should ever want leasing this building? Yes, but on the other hand, through the magic of having the gavel at the General Services Administration, you can say things like, and get away with saying things like, well, the President of the United States isn't a government employee. What? By what magic? I don't know. By magic of the gavel. And watch this. Even better, the magic of other people's gavels, because I can get people with other gavels to agree as well. And thereby the whole of the emoluments clauses, domestic and foreign, were erased from the Constitution early on and tested. It wasn't like they didn't sue to say that's a crazy interpretation of the Constitution. You're completely wrong. But oddly enough, somewhere along the line, the Supreme Court said, yeah, maybe not. Never mind. We're going to dismiss all of these stupid suits. Although they waited until they were moot because he's not president anymore. He's about to run for president again. And also, he doesn't seem to care very much whether or not he's elected to the presidency. He may just seize power, but now it's all moot. Yeah, that was a hell of a trick. Anyway, that's not even discussed here, but it's strongly hinted at by saying a couple of his properties alone generated millions in income in foreign interests, and that wasn't the last of them. There was, of course, Pervalago as well, not to mention the weird siphoning of government subsidies directly into his pocket through other properties, like, if anybody is traveling overseas, they all have to stop in Scotland and stay at the Trump properties there and pay me for that. Since he's left office, questions about how his political and economic interests collide have only expanded. His son-in-law has received billions of dollars from foreign partners. He and the Trump Organization have been working with Live Golf, right, backed by the Saudi Arabian government in a deal, the details of which remain undisclosed. If Donald Trump wins re-election, there is no reason to think that his administration would be any more differentiated from his now more complicated businesses. When Sherry Dillon, was outlining back in January of 2017 how rigorous the barrier between Trump's business and presidency would be, which she didn't even actually do. She asserted that the president-elect had, quote, directed that no communications of the Trump Organization, including social media accounts, will reference or be tied to President-elect Trump's role as President of the United States or the office of the presidency. As he left office, however, Trump integrated the presidential seal into his activities, including parts of a live golf tournament hosted at his club in New Jersey. And of course, they put the presidential seal on the flags on the golf course and everything. I mean, they did everything they could to exploit the presidency. The Westerhout testimony made explicit what was already obvious. Trump's pledge to set his business aside while he ran the country was never implemented. The two were intertwined and remained intertwined as he seeks re-election. They remain now same, just as intertwined as ever. And you're asking for more of the same if you were to elect him or allow him to claim the office, regardless of whether he's elected again. So, just a little reminder that one of the basic claims that he made to the wisdom of even electing him president at all in the first place, if there was any, was also all a lie. All right. Just thought we would put that on the record and remind you. And why not remind you of how terrible other Republicans are as well? For instance, if we wanted to focus on one in particular, Kari Lake might be a good person to focus on, and we might even be able to help Arizona decide to defeat her again. And we'll just have to keep defeating her, I guess, over and over again, because she's relatively shameless. Politico had a piece on her over the weekend as well. What's the date on this one? I guess it was Friday. So heading into the weekend, Kari Lake keeps giving Republicans new reasons to worry, which I find fantastic. Lake keeps reversing her own positions and stirring up feuds, and some in the GOP see other states as better targets this fall. Essentially, they're beginning to reckon with the likelihood that she will lose again and drop another probably otherwise winnable election contest in Arizona. Ali Mutnick and Burgess Everett teamed up for this piece for Politico. National Republicans embraced Kari Lake's Arizona Senate bid, reasoning that she was likely win the primary with or without their support, so they might as well get behind her anyway. Now, they are confronting the consequences of having a MAGA lightning rod as their nominee in one of the most competitive states in the country. And some GOP leaders are undecided about just how much support to offer her in a general election, given ample opportunities elsewhere to pick up Senate seats. Like, do we waste any money? Do we burn money losing with Kari Lake again? And she keeps giving them more and more reason to believe that she will, in fact, come up short again. Lake has not managed a clean pivot from her hard right roots. In the past month alone, she publicly waffled on her opposition to Arizona's near-total abortion ban and returned to the flame-throwing rhetoric of her last run when she urged voters to strap on a Glock to prepare for 2024. That's all given the GOP some pause. In Washington, Republicans say there are more appealing Senate races on which to focus their limited resources, and in Arizona, they are increasingly warning that Lake's divisive persona and instinct for provocation could sabotage them yet again. Sabotage, that's the Southwestern pronunciation, of course. Anyway, when you don't really have a core belief in anything, and you're willing to take whatever position you think is politically expedient at the moment, well, you end up getting caught between a rock and a hard place before too long, said former Representative Matt Salmon of Arizona, who ran against Lake in 2022. Now, as Democrats have placed tens of millions of dollars in fall TV reservations, national Republicans haven't begun to seriously invest in the state. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell left Arizona off his list of places where the party is certain to play, and the top Senate GOP super PAC has begun placing ad buys in other states, but not in Arizona. National money will be sorely needed as Lake is staring down an already massive financial disadvantage in her battle against Representative Ruben Gallego. Lake's campaign expressed confidence in its standing, because that's what they do. They go around saying that they totally feel confident, but whatever. Kari Lake has raised the second most of any GOP challenger and is gaining in the polls more than any GOP challenger, said Garrett Ventry, a senior advisor to the campaign. Her opponent, Ruben Gallego, is far left, voting with Joe Biden 100% of the time. Yay, I guess, for now. Anyway, we will make sure voters know that she will win in November, but she won't. Arizona's Senate seat should, in theory, be a top Republican target for a pickup. It's an open seat in a state where former President Donald Trump is viable, but only viable, I guess. Republicans see Gallego as more vulnerable than previous Democratic nominees because of his lineage in the progressive wing of the party. They don't, but wink, wink, also maybe his lineage. Anyway, yet as Lake has attempted to moderate her image and grow her support outside the party's MAGA base, she is reversing her own positions and stirring up feuds. Not really the way to victory, in their view. Let's see, for instance, well, no, I don't think we're going to have time to fit this one in. We'll come back and discuss the top example of the kinds of feuds she's stirring up after this.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. One more segment to go before wrapping up for the day. We left off in the middle of this Politico article reading about National Republican, what do we say, disappointment in, abandonment of perhaps Kari Lake and her campaign for the Senate. Oh no, she's going to lose again. And this time, though, she won't take the rest of us down with her if we don't spend any money on her or divert that money elsewhere and then hopefully lose those races instead. Well, she's just not a good investment, I guess, from the perspective of national Republicans looking for somebody, I guess, that one can win, obviously, but two, even if she wins, not really sure what we're buying. She's just a volatile figure. She reverses herself on major areas of policy as well. And she has a tendency to stir up fights and feuds with other people. In other words, a lot like murdery Trader Green. She ends up isolating herself from the rest of the conference and promoting herself at the expense of everybody else. And we just don't need another one of those. Case in point, Matt Salmon, who was formerly a Republican member of the House from Arizona and who ran against her, I guess it's in the primary in the bid when she was looking to become governor and got trounced. Maybe that's it. Lake apparently tried to court Salmon at some point as a part of her attempt to unify the party, but she also secretly recorded and released a conversation of the then chair of the state party appearing to ask her what it would take for her to stay out of the Senate race, leading to his resignation and infuriating the old guard of the Arizona GOP. Salmon declined to meet with Lake and thinks the Senate race might already be a losing cause. Ultimately, the Republican Senate committee is probably going to realize before too long that there's far better opportunities for victories in other parts of the country, Salmon said. Gallego started April with nearly 4 times more cash than Lake and is a formidable fundraiser. I think that says more or less the same thing. While Lake isn't on TV currently, Gallego began airing positive spots several weeks ago. Okay, I see the emphasis there was, well, Lake isn't on TV. Gallego is. Meanwhile, Lake is raising eyebrows with frequent out-of-state visits. Where? Pervalago Sex Dungeon, of course, and other jaunts to campaign for other candidates, where she's actually in demand. More people want to see her on the trail for other states than want to see her on the trail, I guess, in Arizona. Arizona is not likely to decide Senate control because Republicans see several other races as easier to win. West Virginia, they consider to essentially be a layup. Montana and Ohio are the highest priority targets. And McConnell added Maryland to his top states. He also left the door open for Lake and said only, who knows about Arizona, like maybe late in the race or something. If it looks like we can win, we'll parachute some money in there. A spokesperson for the McConnell-aligned Senate Leadership Fund, which has reserved airtime in Ohio and Montana, said the group is still evaluating Arizona and other states. That leaves a crushing Democratic financial disparity. Senate Majority PAC, which is aligned with Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, reserved $23 million for the fall campaign. And Gallego has spent $7.9 million on ads and had a $9.6 million advantage in cash on hand at the end of March. Lake, or I guess had $9.6 million on hand. Lake spent just $170,000 versus $7.9 million and has $2.5 million versus $9.6. Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming, the number 3 GOP leader, argued the monetary disadvantage isn't unique and is, quote, expecting that just about every Republican candidate is going to be outspent. Republicans can't write off the state, he said. To me, Arizona is a top-tier state because it's an open Senate seat. Barrasso talks to Lake frequently. In a sign that the party is willing to give her a shot, the National Republican Senatorial Committee is preparing to launch a joint TV ad buy with Lake. NRSC Chair Steve Daines said he's supporting Lake strongly, and further spending decisions in the races would come after the summer. We have limited resources and numerous opportunities, and of course, numerous Trump activities siphoning our dollars off as well. Lake isn't making it any easier on herself. When the state's highest court enacted a near-total ban on abortion, Lake made a public pivot on abortion rights and lobbied state lawmakers to repeal the 1864 ban. But then, on the cusp of that repeal, and under fire from anti-abortion activists, she told local media on a stop in Idaho, for some reason, that it was disappointing that her state refused to enforce the law. So a little bit of a flip-flop there, like entirely. She's also continued to talk about the 2020 presidential election and the 2022 governor election she falsely claims to have won, though countless Republicans urge her to stop. Lake's attorneys were back in court this month asking judges to set aside the results of her governor's race, and she's being sued for defamation at the same time by the Maricopa County Recorder. And the same fire and brimstone rhetoric that Lake tried to swear off when she launched her run in October for Senate continues to crop up. At a rally last month, Lake urged supporters to, quote, strap on a Glock in preparation for the final months of the election, which of course will only mean that many of them will shoot themselves accidentally in the leg. That's what they have. They have the ailment, or will have the ailment, not bird flu, but the one known as Glock leg, one of the favorites among the Glock owners. Senator Mark Kelly, of course, slammed her on Meet the Press last weekend, warning that what Kari Lake said could result in people getting hurt or killed. See, that's the truth. He's thinking about the people that will be shot, I think, intentionally by the Glocks that are strapped on. But I'm telling you that before any of that happens, people will accidentally, and probably have along the way already, shot themselves accidentally, probably after taking her advice. A leading advocate against gun violence after his wife, former Representative Gabby Giffords, was shot in the head in 2011. Kelly told Politico he's had Republicans approach him to talk about Lake. You have somebody on the issue of abortion that's all over the map and has tied herself into a pretzel over it. Arizona does not like divisive, angry people that are going to strip them of rights. It's all grist for Democrats in Gallego to litigate this year in ads, and Republicans say it will take a collective effort to overcome. They're going to spend all the money replaying words that Ms. Lake may have regretted saying. You should hope that she regrets it, said Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina. When you've got tens of millions of dollars being spent against you, you don't get the opportunity to redefine yourself. You've just got to plow through and define your opponent. If national GOP money is freed up, it could go towards boosting Lake, Tillis said, but at the moment he estimated 3 or 4 Senate races would be ahead of Arizona in GOP priorities. Similarly, Senator Ted Young of Indiana, former NRSC chair who's not endorsing Trump, said flipping the Senate is important. It's really important that Republicans control at least some lever of power in Congress. I think it is not, of course. But Arizona is certainly not among his top priorities. I don't know that I'm participating in that one. It's possible, he said, telling us nothing. Beyond the 3 red states at the core of the map, GOP candidates will be vying for limited party resources in Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Arizona. All also, as it happens, places where much of the GOP organization is involved in siphoning that money off for protecting themselves in their own litigation and criminal trials as fake electors, or for interfering with local elections officials and breaking into the machines, or just being compliant with demands from the Trump campaign for siphoning off money to pay for his legal defenses. Well, if Republicans look at the race objectively out in Arizona, I think they will realize that it's going to be tough for them to win that seat, said the very low-key Senator Gary Peters of Michigan, the Senate Democratic campaign chief. Definitely all about business, Gary Peters. But Arizona, once a GOP bastion, remains appealing to Republicans, and they see a good opportunity in running against Gallego, who once shared the stage at a rally for the progressive icon Bernie Sanders. Oh, no. Well, that'll probably ruin almost nothing. The Marine veteran is trying to shed a liberal record that he amassed in Congress. Is that right? Do you think so? He has taken a slew of positions that Republicans are eager to nail him on, including his past support for Medicare for All, which, why would you? Everyone hates that as a veteran, right? Veterans just get their medical care taken care of by the state and, whatever, socialisms. He quietly ended his membership in the Congressional Progressive Caucus. In this cycle, I think she is competitive, said Senator Kevin Cramer, the Republican of North Dakota. Speaking of Kari Lake, I think there's a very good chance we'll catch a wave. I don't think so. The problem for Republicans, though, Arizona voters have already have an established idea of who Lake is, and Gallego's the only one defining himself on the airwaves right now. Gallego went on TV in March, remains on the air. His spots tout his time in Iraq and his working class upbringing. It's a great story, and that's now how most people are going to know him, because they were unaware of who he was before. He's painting on a largely blank canvas, said Chuck Coughlin, longtime consultant for Arizona Republicans. He's actually executing perfectly on the campaign that he's got to run. So, kind words from a local Republican there who I guess expects to lose because Kari Lake is a terrible person and an even worse candidate. So let's see. What are Republicans up to elsewhere in the country or all over the country? Well, I have to turn to Philip Bump again, who's just been so productive on this and just had a great Friday on this front, I guess. Republicans, it turns out, have a new theory of why Biden should be impeached, because all the previous ones have collapsed, and it's kind of funny that they're even trying anymore. Well, the subheader says it all. This time it's Israel. Sure, everybody's ready to impeach him over Israel because you know what he did about something Israel. And I mean, I guess there are certainly people who are upset about how he's approached Israel as a foreign policy concern, but they generally aren't among the group willing to join with Republicans in impeaching him for it. And they don't see eye to eye, as it turns out. The first time a member of the House introduced articles of impeachment targeting President Biden, he had held that title for about 24 hours. Can you guess? Out of the 435 or so members of the House of Representatives who would have filed articles of impeachment against Biden within 24 hours of his inauguration, you've probably guessed it already. On January 21st, 2021, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, herself only having been in that position for a few weeks. And yeah, I mean, I guess it does amount to a couple of weeks, which she would have taken office on January 3rd. Here it is January 21st, so not even 3 weeks into her tenure. She is introducing House Resolution 57. It presented that Biden deserved impeachment. She was pretty sure about that one because of abuse of power. All under 24 hours since taking office. He had already abused power, of course. An abuse of power by enabling bribery and other high crimes and misdemeanors. To wit, of course, his son, Hunter Biden, she believed, had worked with individuals from foreign countries whom Greene loosely tied to his father. Joseph R. Biden, the resolution concluded, threatened the integrity of the democratic system, interfered with the peaceful transition of power. We mean what you guys just did, and imperiled a coordinate branch of government. They were still cleaning the feces off the wall from January 6th when she submitted this resolution. That gives the game away, really. Greene's effort was less about what Biden did than that the Democratic House had a week prior impeached Donald Trump for his role in the January 6th riot at the Capitol. Should this domino eventually lead to Biden's removal from office, all the better. In the 3+ years since that resolution, which went nowhere, 14 other articles of impeachment have been introduced against Biden. They present as the requisite high crimes and misdemeanors that he allegedly, extended the pandemic moratorium on evictions. That's certainly a high crime and misdemeanor. That was another one introduced by Marjorie Taylor Greene in August of 2021, that Biden had allowed immigrants to enter the country while infected with the coronavirus. Greene, again, doing it on the same day, that he withdrew from Afghanistan. Hey, guess who charged him with that one? Greene, still on the same day, but also Representative Lauren Boebert the following month and Louis Gohmert in 2022. What else did they want to impeach him for? Promoting a false sense of how the war in Afghanistan was going, according to Randy Weber of Texas in September of 2021, that he didn't keep building the wall on the U.S.-Mexico border. That a resolution from Representative Bob Gibbs of Ohio later the same month, September 21. Failed to secure the border, just sort of generally, says Representative Bill Posey of Florida in April of 2022 and May of 2023. Boebert did the same in June of 23, and guess who? Marjorie Taylor Greene in May of 23. Also, let's impeach him for selling oil from the petroleum reserve. Who said that was impeachable? Marjorie Taylor Greene, September of 22. Failed to provide information to Congress, including an FBI interview form. That, according to the impeachment resolution from Representative Andrew, Ogles of Tennessee, June of 2023, and was financially involved in drug and prostitution activities. Sure, everybody remembers those, right? I can't even, imagine what they were supposed to be. With that, according to Representative Greg Steube, is that how he says it? Republican of Florida, in August of 2023. Now, Philip Bump, author of the article, continues, many of those include multiple allegations, mind you. The border ones, for example, bounce from the wall to rescinding executive orders implemented by Trump to simply abdicating his authority. Sure. The ones linked to Hunter Biden, like the last one on the list, that's the drug and prostitution activities. I guess somehow that's involved, presented by Republicans over the course of the past 2 years. Okay. It's worth remembering that members of the House have broad protections against defamatory speech, which is why they aren't being sued. Despite all of this, there has been only one impeachment push that has been blessed by the House Republican leadership, as then House Speaker Kevin McCarthy was trying and ultimately failing to retain his leadership position last year. He announced that he was authorizing a formal impeachment inquiry, one that would dig into several of the more common and, yes, to Republican eyes, promising allegations against Biden. And he articulated last September, those allegedly included lying to the public about his son's business dealings, being on the phone with his son while his son was having business meetings, being a member of a family that earned lots of money from non-American business partners, being accused of having taken a bribe, having his vice presidential office coordinate with his son's business partners, and having his administration give his family members quote-unquote special treatment. Well, not much of that has actually materialized, but anyway, over the past 7+ months since McCarthy made this announcement, the efforts to prove that Biden committed impeachable offenses along the above lines has fallen flat. I mean, take your time, but it's not working. The bribery thing blew up in Republicans' faces when the person who made the allegation was arrested on a charge of lying to the FBI about it. The phone calls and money earned by Biden's family were never linked to any action that Biden took, nor was he shown to have benefited. The coordination, meanwhile, was an exchange centered on answering questions from a reporter. Probably the last 4 months of those 7+ have been focused less on proving that Biden did something worthy of impeachment and more on trying to figure out how to save face. That effort is still ongoing. With all of that in the background, then, we come to a new development on Thursday. Representative Corey Mills of Florida announced that he would introduce an impeachment resolution targeting Biden for allegedly engaging in quid pro quo after withholding aid to Israel. Mills's resolution attempts to, or Mills, yeah, no, it is Mills's. Mills, he's Representative Corey Mills. Mills's resolution attempts to draw a comparison between that decision, withholding aid to Israel, and Trump's withholding aid to Ukraine, the trigger for his first impeachment. The difference, of course, is that Trump withheld aid in an effort to get Ukraine to make an announcement aiding his re-election. But never mind all of that, right? House Majority Leader Steve Scalise appeared on Fox Business, where he was asked about this idea. Host Stuart Varney asked if Biden's decision was a high crime and misdemeanor. Scalise didn't actually answer directly. A different guest, though, Representative Wesley Hunt of Texas, suggested that it was. High crime and misdemeanor would be to turn our backs on a country that we had supported for decades, Hunt said. Varney, to his credit, seemed skeptical. They both laughed. Who says politics can't be fun? Oh well, he's skeptical, but, let's all laugh about it and agree. There's probably a reason to impeach him. Go find it. Given how narrow the Republican majority in the House is, it was always risky for the caucus to put forward articles of impeachment, even had they compiled more than zero evidence warranting it. There was no chance that the Senate Democratic majority would remove Biden from office. At this point, the most likely mechanism for removing Biden will be to have him lose his re-election bid. But the impeachment efforts nonetheless proceed apace. With 8 months until the January 2025 inauguration, Green can probably knock out another 6 articles just by herself. Anyway, just a reminder that those things were going on and that they have, 1, no basis in reality, and no capacity for producing shame in Republicans. All right. Let's see. Here, why don't I introduce this? I don't have the full piece, I don't think. So I'm not able to read it all the way through, but this comes from Brian Beutler, whose off-message Substack-style website posted this intriguing idea that might finally entice me to actually subscribe so that I can read the thing. And we'll follow up at some point and see what the reasoning is here. But in a check the paperwork moment, I guess, although it's not Donald Trump's paperwork, but I guess constitutional scholarship paperwork, asking an interesting question here, or rather, I guess, coming to a certain conclusion, having asked the question. But intriguing line of inquiry here from Off Message. No, the headline reads, Donald Trump is not entitled to Secret Service protection in jail or in prison. Subheader here says if his Secret Service detail can't be accommodated, like if he's thrown in jail for either for contempt of court or convicted in this criminal trial and sentenced to prison, what do you do with his Secret Service detail? Well, if they can't be accommodated, then it's simple. He just goes into custody without it. And I mean, I don't see why that couldn't work, right? I mean, they put people in protective custody all the time. Just the president would be in protective custody too. What's the issue? Well, here's how it sets up anyway. When Juan Merchan, the New York judge overseeing Donald Trump's hush money trial, it's the easiest terminology for referring to the trial, even though we've demonstrated that it should be called something else. There's just no handy terminology for it. Well, when Juan Merchan held Trump in criminal contempt of court for the second time, he told Trump he'd have little choice but to order him jailed if he violates his gag order yet again. And there may be some motions to be made about things that he said at the campaign rally over the weekend. But anyway, he also made clear that he'd rather not go there. Going forward, this court will have to consider a jail sanction. Merchan said from the bench, Mr. Trump, it is important to understand that the last thing I want to do is put you in jail. You are the former president of the United States and possibly the next president as well. There are many reasons why incarceration is truly a last resort for me. To take that step would be disruptive to these proceedings, although I think it keeps him close at hand and easy to guarantee that he'll return to the courtroom on time, which I imagine you want to end as quickly as possible. I also worry about the people who would have to execute that sanction, the court officers, the corrections officers, the Secret Service detail, among others. I worry about them and about what would go into executing such a sanction. It's tiresome this deep into the halting era of Trump accountability and this close to the election to hear a judge admit he offers Trump leniency because of both his status and, by implication, his ability and willingness to put other people's lives in danger. At the same time, we didn't need Merchan to say this to know that it was happening. If you don't believe me, go dox a judge's daughter and violate his gag order 10 times and see what happens. Yeah, you won't likely get treated the same way. But it's especially vexing to see Merchan, who seems otherwise to be a diligent lawman, pad his rationale for giving Trump special treatment by repeating the conventional wisdom that Trump's Secret Service detail would have to accompany him to jail or prison. This assumption, and it is assumption, I think, was certainly no precedent for it, gets stipulated as fact just about any time media figures and political professionals contemplate Trump's potential incarceration. It is so pervasive, most outlets treat it as a kind of definitional knowledge that doesn't need to be investigated, like the date of the election or the street address of the White House. The New York Times recently published a piece with the headline, Could Trump Go to Prison? If he does, the Secret Service goes too. It reports that multiple agencies across multiple levels of government have begun making contingency plans for Trump's jailing. But it also includes the claim that this layer of federal protection is mandatory. Federal law requires Secret Service agents to protect former presidents, citing only United States Secret Service spokesman Anthony Guglielmi, who gained notoriety, by the way, for participating in a smear of Cassidy Hutchinson during the House January 6th committee investigation. As near as I can tell, though, Brian teases us because I don't think I have the full development of the idea here, but as near as I can tell, the claim is just made up. Trump's Secret Service detail is not obligatory. If agents in his entourage claim they cannot work out of a prison or a jail, his protection can be withdrawn and he can be ordered into custody, where he'd be under the protection of different officers. There's no reason for anyone to cite his protective detail as a reason that he should be spared consequences. Well, that seems like it requires some additional development, and it may even be the case that Brian did do some additional research and additional development, though he hasn't discussed it openly yet on social media. But I'll have to take a look and see whether there's more to the posting or this is just an opening salvo in all of this. But it is entirely possible that you could fight it out in court. Of course, that also means it's entirely possible that he could fight it out in court and drag this thing out and litigate this for who knows how long. But, in this day and age, you should take nothing for granted. It's entirely possible that while under ordinary circumstances there is some kind of federal mandate for the continued protection of... we know that it's certainly considered to be the case that there's continued protection for presidents after they have concluded their term in office. We've never tested what happens with a criminal president and whether any of that protection is forfeited or, if not outright forfeited, whether or not it can be replaced with another kind of protective custody for those that are criminally convicted and housed in prison. It's not necessarily the case that it is Secret Service. I don't know. I mean, we have to kind of look through the statutory regime on this. Is it mandatory that the Secret Service provide that protection, or simply that they oversee such protection, even if it's provided directly by others? I don't know, but it's a good question. Always dive into the paperwork. Always check things out. Always check the details. Brian Beutler doing us all a service in pointing out that there's a question to be answered here. What about the question of what comes next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? It's answered too.
NetworksRadio.com.
And it's Justice himself who answers it.
You've been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
As a matter of fact, here's what's coming up on the program. Trump panicked overnight about going to prison, and that's a good thing for him to do. I'd like to hear about him panicking. What about in the States? The Wisconsin Supreme Court will be hearing arguments to expand the use of absentee ballot drop boxes, and that's always a good thing. That and much more from around the country, around the world, and around the universe coming up next.